Welcome to the Happy Lawyer Project. I'm your host, Akoma Moronu, and I created the show to help lawyers find happiness in life with a law degree. Together with my guest, we provide the knowledge, skills, insights, and inspiration that you need to find your happy. So a couple of updates about what's going on in my world, and then we will get to the show. So first things first, as you guys may know, if you're following me on Instagram, we closed on the house in Costa Rica. Woohoo! So this is our first investment in real estate overseas. And I know some of you have been asking me to do an episode about that. And so I'm considering doing some Q&A around investing in Costa Rica, or how we picked it, or what the process was like, all those types of things. So if you have any questions for me on that, feel free to shoot them to me by email at akoma@thehappylawyerproject.com, or send me a DM on Instagram. We'll be recording that in the next few weeks, so I look forward to getting your questions. And that process is going really well. The house is closed on, and now we get to do what I think of as the fun part, which is decorating and getting the tenants in and all that kind of fun stuff. And then on the book, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you who've supported me on the book. We are mid-printing process, so I'm waiting to get the proofs back. Once I approve those proofs, they will go to the printer, and then it'll take a couple of weeks for me to get the books in hand, and hopefully they will be out in the mail by the end of in the next 30 days is what we're hoping. So fingers crossed. We'll continue to keep you guys updated. There's so much more to self-publishing a book than I could have ever imagined. And I know a couple of you have asked questions about that as well. If you guys have specific questions, again, happy to answer those questions in a Q&A episode. That's kind of a bonus episode, because I know most of you aren't here for book publishing or for real estate investing, but I know there are lots of you out there who have a children's book in you, or who are interested in investing in real estate, or maybe even just buying a vacation home. So I really do want to share information with you that I already have on hand. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about today is something that I've had on my mind a lot, and that is the courage it takes to turn your wishbone into a backbone. And what I mean by that is that there are so many of you out there who have passions and dreams that are going unfulfilled because you are stuck in dream mode or imagining mode. And you have all these limiting beliefs or ideas about what you need to do before you're ready to pursue that dream or passion. And I have to make it clear that I am not one of those people who believes that everybody needs to leave their day job to follow their passion or find themselves. That is not how everyone is wired, and I definitely don't think that everybody is suited for that type of lifestyle. Nor am I someone who believes that every passion needs to be monetized. And I think there's this tendency, especially perhaps it's just where I spend time online, but I just find so many people now feel like if they enjoy crocheting, they should have an Etsy store. If they enjoy having certain conversations, or they have a lot of knowledge about something, they should have a podcast, and they have to figure out how to monetize that podcast. And I don't know that that's right. I think sometimes a hobby is a hobby and a passion is a passion, and that's enough. What I do want to make clear is that I am someone who believes that everyone should have the courage to take action on those passions and dreams. And that action can be something as small as just recommitting to an old hobby. Perhaps you used to love to dance, perhaps you used to run, perhaps you used to like to cook, and you've kind of let that fall away because, life just gets so busy and you just don't find the time to do it. Or perhaps you've always wanted to do something, and because you've never picked it up, you just think you're never going to have time to pick it up. And I want to encourage you to make that small commitment to your dream and passion, because you never know where a small commitment to yourself may lead you. And that leads us very nicely to today's show, because I chat with Alex Davis, who is the founder of Davis Legal Media. And we dive into how the small decisions that she made along her path to trust her curiosity, double down on her strengths, and really take uncomfortable action, and how that led to where she is today. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode because there's so much in there about kind of when to plan and when to take a leap of faith. So I hope you guys enjoy. Welcome to the Happy Lawyer Project, lawyers. I am so excited to be back behind the mic and connecting with someone who I've been looking forward to get to know a little bit better and whose story I'm excited to share with you guys. So welcome, Alex Davis, to the show.
Thank you so much, Akoma. I'm so happy to be here.
Happy to have you. I would love if you could just start with a brief description of who you are and what it is that you do.
Absolutely. So I am a lawyer, also a small business owner and a creative freelance writer on the side. Right now, I run Davis Legal Media, which is a content marketing company that serves solo and small firm lawyers and also legal entrepreneurs. So it's a company I started about a year and a half ago now. And our mission is to help lawyers create content that attracts the right clients, but also gives them a platform to establish themselves as thought leaders and also authorities in their practice areas. So we do this primarily through website design, branding, email marketing, blogging, social media. We ghostwrite ebooks and white papers. It's a lot of fun to serve lawyers in this capacity after having practiced in a traditional firm for a couple of years. So that's what I'm doing right now. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm here with my husband, Jacob, who's also a lawyer. And we are actually excited to welcome our first child this fall. So life is about to get extra busy for us. So that's me in a nutshell right now.
How fun. That is a lot that you guys have going on. And congratulations on the little one.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's chat a little bit about how you got to where you are today, because did you and your husband meet in law school? I know that, having two lawyers in a household is a lot.
Yes, we did. We did meet in law school. I always joke that aside from my degree, he was the best thing that I got out of law school. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. He was a year ahead of me. So I got the benefit of seeing him go through 3L year and the bar exam. And it sort of prepared me to then go through the same thing the next year. So I feel like I really benefited from watching him. And then he probably didn't benefit quite as much. He just watched me go crazy during our bar summer while I was wedding planning. So he's a very patient man.
So do you guys have a similar practice area? Are you guys doing completely different things? How does that work between the two of you?
Completely different. So he's in more of a traditional role than I am. He actually works for the North Carolina state legislature as a staff attorney there. So he is the one who is, I'm doing sort of the entrepreneurial thing and he's doing the government, working as a team, more traditional job thing. So he and I definitely have a lot to talk about with our very different roles.
And so you started out in, more traditional role. And how did you pick your practice area? Because you were originally a journalism major, is that correct?
So close. I might as well have been. I was actually an English major, and I absolutely loved it. It was so much fun, and I did write pretty much every chance I got. I was writing. I was the editor of a magazine on campus, a political journal, actually. Wrote for our Greek life newspaper, had a blog, kind of a fledgling blog. Just really fell in love with the art and craft of writing, and just writing in a way that really inspired conversation and inspired action. So a lot of people mistook me for a journalism major, which was completely fair. And in terms of how I chose my practice area, it's actually really funny. Honestly, you may or may not relate to this. I'm sure some of your listeners probably can, but I picked law school because at some point probably someone said to me, hey, you know what, you're a good writer, you're a good speaker. I think my parents would have liked to tell me I was a good arguer. And, you have this heart for justice, you should be a lawyer. So I kind of just latched onto that thinking, yeah, that sounds good. I always, was very type A, always wanted something impressive to work toward next. So I just kind of plunged headlong into law school. And I had my doubts about whether I actually wanted to be a practicing lawyer. I was excited about going to law school because I loved school and I loved being in academia. I loved being on law review and enjoyed sort of immersing myself in that world. But had these just doubts the whole time that I don't know if I actually want to be a practicing lawyer. Like, I just don't know if I'm going to do the whole Perry Mason, like, feats of legal prowess in the courtroom thing. Like, I just didn't really feel like that was for me. But, as a super busy law student, I didn't really take the time to think through what I wanted. So I just went ahead and applied for traditional law firm jobs and picked a good one and practiced for almost 2 years. So I really fell into my first job after law school, to be honest.
And so at some point you decided that you wanted to make that entrepreneurial leap, and what planted the seed for you, and how long was it from the time that you had that first, because you said you had some doubts already in law school, but from the point that you were like, okay, I need to do this, to the time that you were doing it, how did that transpire?
Oh my gosh. Yes, that is a great question. It was definitely not a straight and narrow path. So I started at this firm and I was just completely in awe to have this job. It was a great job with great people. I did plaintiff's personal injury work and business litigation primarily, but I could tell right away that just something was off. I mean, the work was really, really interesting. I really, really enjoyed the people I worked with. They were fantastic, great mentors, excellent lawyers, very kind, very encouraging to me, told me that, any direction I wanted to take my practice, I could feel free to do that. So the sort of first red flag for me was realizing I felt like the problem wasn't my environment. I had a lot of friends who got into firms and it was not a great environment. They thought, I just need to change where I am and then I'll be happier. And they did. But for me, I thought this is kind of as close to an ideal situation as it could be. And the fact that I'm still not loving it is really not a good sign, if that makes sense. So it just, it really confirmed my initial suspicion. And I think for me, it was litigation. I felt like a lot of my strengths were actually liabilities in litigation. I can definitely go into that more if you want, but just felt like, what I brought to the table, it just wasn't fitting. So I figured it out, just kind of got myself there. But, the antagonism of the adversarial process really gave me a lot of anxiety. And I just could tell that I just don't know that this is the trajectory that I really want to be on for the duration of my career. So I was maybe about a year into the job, I started to think, okay, you know what, maybe this is not what I want to do forever. So it was also really fortuitous because it was about at that time, so that would have been probably early 2017. Since it was a small law firm, they brought me in on a lot of kind of auxiliary tasks. And one of the tasks they decided to bring me in on around this time was helping them with their marketing. So specifically, they said, look, we've got this blog that's kind of defunct. Can you resurrect it? Can you help us write copy for the new website we're launching? So I started doing that and I loved it. I thought it was great. And I thought it was so cool to see how blogging was actually bringing in business for the firm. There was one particular post that we published that elicited 4 or 5 calls in 1 week for people who had seen that specific post when they were searching for lawyers. So I thought, this is really interesting. So I remember saying to my husband one day, I said, if I could still work for these guys, but just do that type of thing and not practice law, I think I'd really love it. And I think I'd be good at it. And he said, well, why don't you just try to figure out a way to do that for law firms? So that, to answer your question, about a year before I ended up actually effectuating that transition, I initially had that seed in my mind to say, hey, I think that there's a way for me to marry my love of writing and my creative streak. I found a way to kind of combine that with my legal skills, my legal experience. And I thought there might be a way for me to parlay this into a career. So that was what initially got me thinking about, is this a viable career? Is this a viable trajectory? And sort of catapulted me into doing some more research on what that might look like.
So for people out there who struggle with kind of figuring out what they like, I'd be interested to know, did you know kind of instantly that you really enjoyed it? Or was it like something that you did for a while and the more you did it, the more you were like, this is super cool?
It was kind of both. I mean, it definitely intrigued me from the outset. I just wasn't exactly sure what it would look like career-wise. So what I started doing was I just started writing more and more. I launched a blog. It was unrelated to the law. It actually still exists. It's a little dusty now, but I launched a blog for professional women where I interviewed women and wrote about just, how to be a young, successful millennial. So I just started doing that and I gained a little more of a following from that. I wrote for just some local bar blogs, just kind of wanted to put some feelers out there and see if I can kind of gain some traction from my writing, and continue to blog for my firm. And I started to realize I think I could really enjoy doing this for a living. The question was just, how do I make money out of it? How do I turn it into a business? So I think the interest was there and it built over time, but the big question was, okay, well, what next? How do I turn this into a feasible next career move for me? So
yeah, let's dive into that. What did that research process look like for you? How did you start to think about, did you immediately think business or did you at first try to just monetize it without putting a business structure around it? Like, how did you practically go about transitioning?
So definitely the latter. So I like to say I had a plan, but I also didn't really have a plan. It was actually sometime around Christmas of 2017. I remember going on a road trip with my husband. I just looked at him and I just kind of stuttered out, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start freelance writing. I'm going to focus on helping lawyers with their blogging and their social media. I'm just going to grab work from people I know. He just kind of looked at me and just said, okay, God bless them. Like, okay, let's make this work if that's what you want to do. So yeah, so I definitely did not anticipate this mushrooming into a business model with all of the different services that we offer now. It started off as me just freelancing. And there were kind of a couple tiers of decision-making when it came to making this shift. And I would love to share those because I think that it really helped me kind of get past the mental block of thinking, is this really a good idea for me to leave such a good job and start freelancing? I mean, that was scary because I thought, man, what if I fall flat on my face? What if this doesn't work out? What if people laugh me out of rooms? This is a lot. So I think for me, the first thing was deciding, do I want to stay in the legal field or do I want to step away from it altogether? And I think that, a lot of lawyers think there's kind of two camps of lawyers. There are people who live and breathe and sleep and eat the law, and they follow a very traditional path. And then on the other side, there are people who are miserable as lawyers, and then they run screaming in the other direction, right? But I feel like there's a lot of people who are kind of in between, and I was definitely one of those where I was not an unhappy lawyer. I just didn't want to practice right now. I was really involved in our local bar. I loved it. I loved the people that I got to work with. I didn't want to leave all that behind. So I thought, okay, how can I stay in the legal field but just do something non-traditional? That was my first point to get to. And I think that that's a really important step because deciding whether you want to shed your identity as a lawyer altogether or keep it, I think is really important in informing exactly what you want to do. So that was kind of number one for me. And then number two was the pesky concept of money, which I feel like we probably all have to think about unless we're independently wealthy. But I notice a lot of lawyers cite this as a major impediment from pursuing something new. If you're switching to another job, that's one thing. If you're, going to go from one salary to another. But if, like me, you're starting your own venture, it can be really intimidating to think, okay, well, how am I going to make money from this? How am I going to sustain a living? And for me, side hustling wasn't an option because I couldn't have done the work that I was doing for other lawyers while being connected to a firm. So what I did was actually I did document review for a few months part-time while I was starting to freelance and starting to get clients. And I feel like sometimes things like that can be a little bit stigmatized in the legal field, that, oh, you're doing a side hustle, oh, you're doing doc review. But I think that, having a plan like that can be very valuable because it can really allow you to build your new venture, to gather clients, to build a business with confidence because you have a buffer and you have some income coming in. So for me, that was huge, was getting past that mental block of saying, I don't want to do that, to say, you know what, I'm willing to do what it takes to get this idea of mine off the ground. And I think that, if something is really worth it to us, then we will do what it takes to get there. And then the third was kind of figuring out the logistics. And for that, I really didn't have a plan. And I would really encourage other people, other type A lawyers to do the same. I think that, when I first left my firm, my plan was just to freelance, but very quickly I learned that I thought I could gain more clients and more influence by organizing formally as a business. And then it just sort of mushroomed from there. So I think the third step is just being ready to say, I'm comfortable starting, not to feel like you have to have your 5-year plan mapped out. Because sometimes getting hung up on the logistics can be very paralyzing. And I think that it's really important for us, especially as lawyers who are just so analytical and so organized and want everything planned out to a T, just to sort of have the gumption just to say, I've got a loose plan that's feasible. I've got a plan to monetize. Let me just go for it now. And you can pivot later. That was a lot.
Oh my gosh. There's so much in there that I love. And I'm so glad you brought up the money piece because I wrote that down as the money, because I think that is one of the big elephants in the room that people often don't want to talk about, is how you get over those money fears and kind of how do you transition the money part. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And then also that, the mental, there's so many good things in there. Really, the mental decision about whether or not you want to continue practicing is such an important piece as well. And then really believing in yourself, right? At the end of the day, that's kind of what your third point is that even if you have that perfect plan, what you're really saying is, I believe in myself to execute, right? I don't think any person thinks when they go out on a 5-year plan that it's going to go exactly as planned. But what you're saying is, I'm betting on me, and I'm betting that whatever comes up, I can figure it out. And so the thing I was wondering, and I wanted to ask is, did you give yourself kind of benchmarks? Did you say, I'm going to give this X amount of time, and if at that point it's not working, then I'll go back to practicing, or I need to be were there any sort of initial goals that you set just to know if you were headed in the right direction?
That is a really, really good question. And, to be honest, I didn't, which is really uncharacteristic for me because I'm extremely type A. I didn't. I knew that I really wanted to do this. So my plan from the beginning was just to pivot when I felt like something wasn't working. I did have income goals. I did say that within a year, I wanted to replace my income from before. And I'm very thankful that has just started to happen. So just over a year later. But other than that, no, I kept sort of a basic framework for what I wanted the business to look like, but I was very, very flexible with the actual execution. So for instance, if I tried a certain course and it didn't really stick, I just would ditch it and then I'd pick another one. Or if I tried a certain marketing plan and it seemed to fall flat, I would pivot and try something else. So benchmarks, not as much benchmarks as sort of a general plan and just sort of a flexibility and willingness to adjust it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes absolute sense. And I find this very interesting because one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is whether having the mindset that kind of you just outlined is really the more prevalent one amongst true entrepreneurs. And that mindset is, there is no benchmark because I'm just going to make it work. Like, there is no plan B because this is the only plan. Like, I'm going to just keep doing whatever it takes to make this work. And I think sometimes when you have that plan B, or it's that whole idea that sometimes you have to let go of where you were to get to where you're going. It's the whole, you can't sail across the ocean without losing sight of the shore kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because if you're still clinging to that plan B, that might, for some people, be an impediment from going all the way with their plan A, because they think, oh, well, it almost makes you more tentative because you think, oh, well, I have a backup, so it doesn't really matter if this doesn't work. You know what I mean? So I completely agree with you.
Yeah. And so, but then I think that, and I wonder, because this is the way my mind works, if it helps that, I mean, obviously I think people who are listening will say, well, it helps because you have a husband and your husband makes money. And so you know that you can take that risk, right? Like,
yes, I do. And one thing that I want to say by way of encouragement is, maybe for people who say, oh, well, but I don't have a spouse who works, or, I am the primary breadwinner, or, oh, but I'm crippled by student loans, I can never do that there are options. Doc Review was a great option for me because it was a great way to earn some money. And I think when you're building a business, especially if you are marketing a product or service and you're desperate, I think your customers can sense that. But if you have a backup source of income, you can build your business slowly and intentionally. So I think even if you are the sole income earner, there are still options. And actually, I know that you spoke with, in a previous episode, Veronica Peterson of Leaving Law Behind. And one thing that was said in that episode that really resonated with me was this idea that money is abundant. Mm-hmm. And that, and I've been following the folks that Leave Law Behind for a while. I think they're great, but I love that because there really are so many ways to make to make an income, to make a living. And I think that sometimes as lawyers, we limit ourselves thinking, oh my gosh, the only way for me to pay off my loans and pay my bills is to slog away and at a job I don't like. But that's just not true. So I like to encourage people, to know that there's always an excuse that can be made that, oh, this is not the right time, or I don't think this is feasible for me, but that there are options. Maybe for you, it is side hustling, doing Doc Review, or heck, working at Starbucks, or, I know people who've sold their houses so they can, get a nest egg so they can start their, launch their business. I just like to encourage people to know that no matter what situation you're in, that there are options and you can make it work. If it's something that you're really excited about and you have a loose, flexible plan.
I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said, what are you willing to do, right? What are you willing to do to pursue the thing that you believe will lead to a better, more fulfilling life for yourself? And sometimes it's going to be a tough decision, but, at least for those of us who make those tough decisions, we think it's worth it. But there's no way to know because none of us are at the end of our life now. And it's only kind of one of those things that looking back, you can reflect and say, yep, it was worth it. But there's no way to know what the alternative ever was. So
right,
you kind of have to just have that faith that betting on yourself, investing in the things that matter to you and pursuing those things with your full focus and heart will be the right choice.
I agree completely. And I think walking ourselves, as lawyers, we're trained to think about the worst case scenario, right? We all are. Mm-hmm. So, walking yourself through the worst case scenario can really be helpful too. Say, okay, well, what's the worst case? I try this, it doesn't work. I start a business and it flops. I go to a new job and I get fired or I hate it. Well, okay, what's the worst case? I'm unemployed for a brief time. Well, I have this really versatile degree. Let me just go right back into one of the many jobs that I can do with this degree. So I think that, like you said, you'll never know the alternative unless you try it. I think, absolutely. Just try it. You have recourse if it doesn't work out. It's okay. So absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I'm really glad you said that.
I think people need to get out of the mindset that, back to my question about milestones, that life has to happen at a certain pace. Because at the end of the day, the thing people worry about is that they're going to go down the wrong path and have to start over, right?
Right.
It's not, I don't necessarily think people don't think they could have, that they couldn't start over. I think it's that I will have wasted my time. And what I want to emphasize is that betting on yourself and pursuing your dreams is never a waste of time.
Agreed.
And life is not a race.
No, it's not. It's like, who the heck are we racing? We live like we're constantly trying to, we set these artificial deadlines for ourselves, and they're so unhelpful.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the race is not life, right? Like that's what happens at the end of life. Like we don't want to get there sooner.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, we could slow that roll a little bit. Yeah.
So there are so many things. You've said it a number of times here. I mean, the degree is so versatile, and that's why so many people, I mean, we're all told that before we get the law degree. And I think for some of us, sometimes it's almost an abundance of choice, and it's easier to just take the easier path, because the alternative path isn't as clear. What advice would you give to lawyers in my audience who are kind of early in the stages of exploring all the other things you can do with a law degree? I mean, where should they start when thinking about what they want to do with their law degree?
That's a fantastic question. I say, okay, I've got a couple points here. So first, start with right where you are. So your current job, whether you're at a firm, whether you're working for the government, whether you're in-house, that is a tremendous resource for you. It's just a treasure trove of insight about kind of who you are, what you love, what you don't like. So what I would recommend doing first is sit down and make a list. Make a list of everything that you really like about your job. Make a list of everything you're really good at. And then make sort of like 4 quadrants. And then in the other 2, write what you don't like about your job or what you wish was different. And then what you struggle with. What are some of your weaknesses? And just be honest with yourself about your weaknesses, and be honest with yourself about your strengths. See if there are any patterns there in what you wrote down. So for instance, for me, it was things like writing, building, working with other people to make an idea come to life, helping lawyers and working with lawyers, but, again, not necessarily being one. Go ahead and write that all out. Second, this is an idea I do not take credit for. One of my friends recommended it to me, but it's this concept called a career document. You can call it whatever you want, but for me, it looked like a Google Doc. And every time I accomplished something really interesting at my job, or tried a new project, or did something new, or overcame a challenge, I would plop it right in that Google Doc right away. So when it came time for me to do informational interviews, or if you're applying for actual jobs, actual interviews, that didn't apply to me, but it might apply to some of your listeners, you can refer to that document and say, when they ask me, what have you done at your current job, you can scan through that document and pull out items that you think would translate directly into the job that you're applying for or that you're trying to get. So really documenting, what it is you've done. And you'll be really astounded when you do that to see how much you have done and how much you do know beyond just the nuts and bolts of practicing law. Maybe you devised a new system for your firm. Maybe you were really instrumental in team building or some other aspect, something in operations, something in tech. So making a career document can be really, really helpful. And then finally, taking this data that you've made from all these lists and all this reflection and finding a way to sort of sift through it. So for me, I don't know about you, but I actually really love personality tests. So the Myers-Briggs was actually really helpful for me. Also the Enneagram. And then some people.
What's your Enneagram?
Okay, I'm a 1. What are you?
I am a 2.
Oh, I wish I was a 2. Oh, man. What's
a 1?
Oh, man. The 1, I can't remember. It has a title. I want to say it's...
I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
The Reformer.
Yes, the Reformer. That's exactly right. So 1s are hyper organized and sometimes a little bit anal, but...
They're also called the perfectionist.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. So... Yes, you can imagine is a double-edged sword in litigation because it comes in handy, but at the same time, you can drive yourself bananas. So anyway, I would recommend taking those tests. I think they can give you a lot of insight about who you are and really where your strengths, and your skills, where they fit. So do a little bit of data mining on yourself and your job. And then second, the most important part is once you kind of have a general sense of your interests, tap into your network. So I think that the best way to learn about your options is to talk to people who are actually out there doing them. So search online, comb through your LinkedIn network. I like to say if you put your LinkedIn profile on private, you can just stalk people with impunity and they'll never know. And just read their profiles, see what they're doing. A lot of people overlook the career center at their law school. They have a bank of alumni and what they're doing for a living. They can make an introduction for you that's not cold, and you can meet with folks. So once you've done the important work for yourself, sifting through your strengths, your weaknesses, go out there in the community and talk to people and figure out what it's like to actually do the type of work that you're interested in.
I love that. And I think that it's really practical, actionable advice. And so I'm going to put on a layer of kind of woo on top of that.
I love that. Go for it.
I think that that's great advice. I think so few people take that advice, but then even when people take that advice, I think people don't listen to themselves enough in the process, and they let other people's energy impact them. And so one of the things I would encourage you is that when you're doing these informational interviews, it's so easy that when someone else dislikes their job or they like their job, you're like, oh, that sounds good or that sounds bad because of their energy. And so to really just hear what they're saying and see how you're reacting to it and kind of really dig into the day-to-day, what do you do? What does your day look like? What are the types of things that challenge you in your day? What are the things that are frustrating? What are the things that are exciting? What are the, what do you think are the strengths and the weaknesses of your role? Where can your role go? What do you, all these kind of super detailed questions. And when they say these things, don't listen to how they feel about it, but think about how you would feel about it. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that's the self-awareness piece that sometimes I see people missing, is that they hear someone, they're like, oh, my uncle, he works at a bank doing project management and he was a former lawyer and he hates it. And I'm like, but what does he do there? Maybe you would love it because you and him have different personalities, different interests, and you have to kind of take the person out of the equation and just kind of really assess the role.
Yes. Exactly. 100%. There are a lot of negative Nancys out there who, like you said, can unfairly paint your view of an entire job. So
there's lots of people who would be happy anywhere. Do you know what I mean? And they get on the phone and they're like, I'm a coroner. It's the best job ever. And you're like, oh my God, maybe I'd like being a coroner. And you're like, no, you would hate it.
Exactly. If they can get you excited about that, then that's a skill. Yeah, absolutely.
I just feel like there's so many people out there who get excited about, because I see people who are so sure about what they wanted to do with their legal profession. And they met someone who was just so passionate about what that person was doing that they jumped on board, and they're like, yes. I don't enjoy it at all. And I'm like, what happened? What did you yourself in this process? It's so easy. It's such human nature. So I don't fault anybody for doing it, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Oh my gosh. So glad you did. It's so true. And it's so important.
So as the founder of Davis Legal Media, you help lawyers create compelling online content. And so before we transition to the next section, I would really be remiss if I didn't ask you about your area of expertise and kind of some high-level tips about what lawyers are doing right and wrong online.
Yes, there's a lot there. But I think one thing, first of all, I'll start with the positive, that they're doing right a lot. Lawyers are starting to really catch on to just the importance of having an online presence. I feel like that's really burgeoning among lawyers. They're out there, they have social media. I've seen some really great websites and blogs started by lawyers. So I think that's fantastic. I think the biggest challenge is that a lot of times lawyers, they just don't speak their client's language. So you'll get on their website and it's written just completely like it's written by a lawyer. It's full of legalese. It sounds like they're writing the intro section of a brief. They're using archaic terminology. And it's not written in a language that the clients would connect with or that would resonate with them. So for instance, I always like to think of the example of family law. Someone who is having an issue isn't going to sit down at the computer and search necessarily divorce and custody lawyers in such and such situation. They're probably just going to sit down and go, what happens when my ex-husband kidnaps my children? Or, something that, they're going to search for a lawyer using the specific language that they're using to categorize their problem. But the problem is a lot of lawyer websites are not written to capture that language. So it's a problem from an SEO perspective because lawyers just aren't catching all the leads that they could be catching because client search terms aren't matching up with the content on their websites. But also, even if people do make it to their website, they're going to get there. And if you're not speaking on the same level or you're not speaking the same language, you're going to lose people. So that is the biggest challenge I face with lawyers, is helping them write not like lawyers, which is really hard because it's just really entrenched and ingrained in us. We've been trained that way, and it's really difficult to unlearn our training and to say, okay, we can actually be conversational now. It's okay to use layman's terms. That is a big challenge for lawyers, but I think it's getting a lot better with the rise of more online content.
I think that's such a good tip. And I think whether you're writing content online or not, that's a skill that every lawyer should learn, because it's something I certainly didn't have to learn when I was at the firm, because my clients were such sophisticated actors that
Exactly.
For the most part, I was working with large banks and things like that. They were bankers, so they understood securities laws. They understood what was happening. But now most of my clients are my in-house, clients, and they're engineers, they're pilots. They have no idea what legalese is. And
Right.
so if my mom, who speaks English as a second language, couldn't understand it, that's my standard. Not that I think that they speak second language, but I also do, support a global team. So there are actual language issues. For a lot of them, English is a second language. But point is, I've just gotten so much better about just putting things in like simple bullet points. This is what you need to know. If you need more help, these are the things that I can help you with. Let me know.
Exactly. And you made such a good point about, the difference between your clientele. I mean, working for high-level corporate executives is so different it's a different language than, like you said, working for engineers, and which is different from working with individuals who've been injured in a car accident. So yeah, absolutely. Knowing your client and knowing the language they speak is so, so, so critical. And I think sometimes as lawyers, we can all be blind to that. So absolutely.
And so is there anything, as far as people who are thinking about starting content, you say blogs are still where it's at for lawyers? Is that the best place to start?
Yes, to me, blogging is always, always, always a solid choice. I know that there are naysayers out there who say, blogging is dead. I say, well, Instagram's only been around a couple of years. Blogging's been around since the mid-2000s, and it is going strong and it is not going anywhere. The beauty of blogging is that it's called owned media. In some circles, it's the idea that whereas when you're writing on a social media platform, you are essentially just renting that platform. You don't control the algorithm, you don't own your followers. But when you build a blog from scratch, that is content that you control, that you own, that you have the full rights to, that's not going anywhere. It's always, always, always a fantastic practice to blog. And then you can take the blog posts and parlay them into social media posts and do other things with them. So absolutely 100%. I always recommend that lawyers have a blog, and people look for them. People like to read them. People like to see that their lawyers know what they're talking about and they can speak authoritatively on their areas of expertise. So yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah. Well, I can get into so much more detail on that, but I will move us on to the next section. And
Sure.
I call this the happiness hot seat, and it's a quick fire round of questions.
Okay.
Yes, so I will try my best to hold myself accountable to that. Are you ready?
Me too. Me too.
All right. Number 1, how do you manage overwhelm?
Oh, gosh. Okay. This is my type 1 coming out. Having a plan and prioritizing what's on my plate every single day, picking the top 3 things I need to get done that day and focusing on those, not getting bogged down in extraneous details. And then second, the Wunderlist app. Are you familiar with the Wunderlist app?
I am, but for the listeners who are not, please go ahead.
It's so good. It's so good. So it's an app. You just I think it's Android and iPhone, Apple compatible, but it's essentially an app where you make to-do lists and you can sync it with your spouse or your partners. You can to-do list, you can share it. And you can make a list for pretty much any category in your life, and you can check things off your list and you can add details. It's a game changer.
I have such a strong urge to go on, but I'm going to take that and move on to the next question. Number 2, how do you prioritize your own happiness?
I think taking a step back to rest and to do things that I enjoy and that bring me joy for absolutely no reason at all. Not to pad my resume, not to advance my career, just joy for its own sake. I think it fills me up. It makes me a better wife, a better business owner, hopefully soon a better mother, a better friend. Just chasing joy, just chasing it for its own sake and not for any other purpose.
What kind of things bring you that kind of joy?
Spending time with people, spending time with family and friends, honestly, sitting around a table. I love to cook. I love to eat. My family is Italian, just big meals, sitting, talking to the people that are important to you, going outside and taking walks, drinking coffee, lots and lots of coffee.
I love that. I think simple and timeless.
Yes, exactly.
Number 3, can you describe a mindset shift that changed your life?
One word, gratitude. Gratitude.
Such a good one. When did that happen for you?
Oh man, probably sometime in the last year. My husband said something to me along the lines of, he'd seen this quote somewhere. He couldn't remember where, but one day, or there was a time in your life where you dreamed about where you are right now. And I think that we can get so bogged down in like, oh, well, are we keeping up with everybody else? Are we really where we should be in our career? It's like, no, think about 10 years ago when you were in the trenches of, I don't know, college, law school, whatever, a job. And you thought you just dreamed about, doing something you love with your career, surrounding yourself with great people, and look at your life and say, if you can look at your life and say, like, I'm doing that now. Is it perfect? No, but just recognizing that you're already living the life that you want to be living, just the way it is, and that it's enough.
I love that. And just to put one last spin on that, and I think the reality is if you don't learn how to be grateful for what you have will never be enough.
Exactly. Yes.
So it is a skill in and of itself that's worth developing.
100%. Absolutely.
Okay, number 4, name a book that has inspired you on your journey.
Oh, can I pick 2? I'll be quick.
Yes.
Okay. First one, Present Over Perfect by Shauna Niequist.
Familiar.
Yes, so good. And then Essentialism by Greg McKeown.
Yep.
So you've read Essentialism?
Yes. Essentialism doesn't work for me because it's not my personality type, but I think it's a great book. I tried a year, I read The One Thing, I read Essentialism, like all these books about prioritizing and like focusing, but that's just not, my brain doesn't work that way.
Sure.
Which took me a year to realize about myself, is that I just am one of those people who I'm at my best when I have 2 or 3 things.
Sure.
Because I need that creative space. But it's such a good book. And I think even if essentialism itself is not doesn't work for you in the traditional sense, it still helps me with my prioritizing. And even with the 2 or 3 things, there's still things that are essential within those spheres.
Yes.
So yeah,
exactly.
Such a good book.
Exactly. Yeah. And hey, if that book had a role in teaching you more about who you are intrinsically, then that's a great thing.
Yeah, no, such a good book.
Yeah.
Number 5, what do you think separates happy lawyers from lawyers who struggle to find happiness in life with a law degree?
That's so hard because I really think that there's a lot of things, but I think what I'm going to say, I'm going to harken back to something you and I had discussed earlier in our conversation. I think sometimes we forget that we have choices. We have a choice about how to live our lives. And not just how to structure our days, but also what we do with our lives. I think we really can view our degrees as limiting us. And we get bogged down and feeling like, we've got to stay on this trajectory. We've got to stay on this path, even if we're not happy. But that's just not true. There are so many things we could do with our degrees. There's so many skills that they give us. We have options. I think, one thing I've picked up in conversation with colleagues is just this sort of paralysis that comes from thinking that I don't really have the power to choose. This is kind of the path I picked, and this is the path I'm on now. But I think when we finally let go of control and just accept, no, it's okay to experiment. It's okay to try something different. It's okay to take a different path. That can really increase our happiness, even if we don't actually follow that path right away. Just the thought of knowing we have that option can really be empowering and just give us a lot of peace, I think. And and a lot of joy just knowing like, hey, we're the authors of this life that we're living. So we might as well choose a path that fits us well and where we thrive.
Yes, absolutely. I think everybody has a different level of choice, but I think for the most part, those of us who are lucky enough to have gotten into this profession have probably more choice than most, just because you don't get to this point without having a certain amount of intellectual capacity and an amount of ability to push through hard things and a support system. There's a lot of things that you've kind of collected over the years to get to this point that will bode well for you as you try to figure out how to make the most of them in a fulfilling way.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So before we wrap up, I always like to give my listeners an opportunity to ask questions of my guest. And so I got a question today for you from Jasmine. And so Jasmine was asking about putting personal things on social media. Like if you have any tips or suggestions. In particular, she was asking about her kids, but do you just generally, I think as well, what are your thoughts about how much of yourself personally you should put on social media as an attorney?
Jasmine, I would just say that is a fantastic question. And that's a question that I get all of the time. I think I'm a big proponent of showing a little bit of your personal life as an attorney. I think depending largely on your practice area, and of course, if you're with a firm, kind of what their policies are about that. But I think that our clients really connect with us when we show our humanity. And when we show who we are outside of work. I think that when you show your humanity online, you are showing how you are distinguishable from the lawyer down the street who may have a very similar or virtually identical practice or set of services. So I think that is a great way to distinguish yourself. You also never know what kind of connections will be forged with prospective clients when you share yourself. Maybe you have a hobby you enjoy on the weekends that they also really enjoy, and that's the reason they pick you over someone else. That said, there is a way to go overboard. I think that is a matter of personal discretion. I think that we all personally know our comfort levels. We know when we're oversharing or we're putting something out there that's not quite right. And I think that a good rule of thumb is to ask somebody if you have a question about whether it's appropriate to post it, get an opinion from a colleague and say, if I post this, would this seem overboard? Would it seem disingenuous? Or is it in line with who I am professionally? So don't ever be afraid to ask for advice. But fantastic question. Really, really good.
So just to touch on that really quickly, would you propose that most people have kind of a professional page where they share some things personally and then separate that from their personal page where they post all their other personal stuff?
I think for a law firm, yes, I think that's a great idea. I depart from this model as a business owner in a non-traditional field, but generally for a law firm, yes, I would recommend separating the two. That way with your personal account, you don't have to question what you're putting on there, but I still think it's okay to get a little bit personal on your law firm account, but I do think to maintain a certain level of professionalism, it is a good idea to separate them, but it's also good in terms of marketing. You are probably more likely to attract more of the people that you want as prospective clients if your firm, for instance, if your, say, Instagram handle is your firm name versus your personal name. So yes, I do think it's advisable to maintain a separate presence if you can.
Fantastic. So last question, what is the best way for my listeners to follow your work and learn more about what you are up to?
Absolutely. I'm always excited to connect with people over questions or over a mutual appreciation for alternative legal careers and taking unique paths. So yeah, I would love for anybody to reach out. My website's probably the best place. It's just davislegalmedia.com. There's a blog there. I send out an email newsletter. So davislegalmedia.com. Or on Instagram, it's just my name. It's just Alexandra E. Davis, or Facebook at Davis Legal Media. And I share a lot of content on both of those. So I'd love to connect.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alex. It was great to have you on.
Thank you so much, Akoma. I really, really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Thanks so much for listening. And if you got value out of this episode and you think there's someone else who might enjoy it, I'd love for you guys to share. And if you have any questions for me, please head over to the website at thehappylawyerproject.com and you can leave me a voicemail right on the website. When you get there, you'll see a little tab on the right hand of the screen and you can click on it and leave a voicemail there. I absolutely love hearing from you guys. Last but not least, if you enjoy this podcast and you like the content that I'm bringing to you guys and you haven't done so already, I would really encourage you guys to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and review. That's all for this week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening.